It's Create Day, my friends. Welcome back to another video. Today it's all about Easter eggs. I'm going to be using some decoupage, some stamps to make faux porcelain eggs, and then some beautiful metallic butterfly eggs. These were all pretty easy and a lot of fun to make. Let's get started. The eggs I'm using today are wooden eggs. They came from Amazon, but the company is called Woodpeckers, and they are a good quality wooden egg if you like to work with that type of egg. I made a little homemade egg holder. I actually end up doing something different later on that works a lot better than that. I just used some leftover packing material and put holes in it. And I want to go ahead and prime my eggs first before I start applying my paints. So I'm using white gesso, getting as much of that egg painted as I can, and then be able to stick it into the little holder, let that dry, then take them out and flip them over and paint the other side. The rice paper I'm using today, I believe I got this from Milton's Daughter, miltonsdaughter.com. I am using a paintbrush with some water on it to just get a nice ragged edge around the images that I want to use for these. I'm going to do 4 in the decoupage paper, and then the other 2 eggs will just be colored and done with the little spatters of paint to make them look like speckled eggs. I didn't get footage of it, but after the primer was dry on my eggs, I gave them all a couple of coats of Fusion's mineral paint in the color Parchment, which is a nice off-white with kind of a gray undertone to it. I'm going to hold these up against the egg so that I can see where I need to make little tear marks so that this will lay down flat onto my egg in order to apply the Mod Podge and have it lay down and not buckle and cause me problems. So I just checked it first, and now I'm making tears in it, and then I check it again, and once I have it to where it will lay down, I can go ahead and start applying my Mod Podge. I do half of the little piece of rice paper, get that on there, smooth it out, and then I do the other half. I will leave a product list in the description box as well as links to all of the things that I can find links to. Once I have that all glued down with my Mod Podge, I just put my hand in a little sandwich bag. You can use saran wrap. And I'm smoothing out really well around all those edges, making sure that I don't have a lot of wrinkles or bubbles, and just making sure that the edges are down really well. And then I can go in with my second layer of Mod Podge on top of that. I repeat these same steps on the remaining 3 eggs. Once those had dried, I wanted to apply some crackle to them. I'm using Distress Crackle Paint. I have not used this one before. I thought I'd give it a try. If you watch certain videos, you'll see that I have not always been super successful with the crackle. So I'm trying different products to see which one I gel with the best. I know it's mostly me not doing it right, but I just feel like maybe there's one that's going to work better or be easier for me to work with than others. So what I'm doing is giving all 4 of the decoupaged eggs a coat of this crackle paint. I have to let it dry and then turn it over and get the other half of the egg. The 2 remaining eggs in this little set of 6 I'm doing are getting a coat of Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint in the color Putty. I will be adding some other colors to these eggs, so this is just a good base coat for me. And you can see that I'm using a different little egg holder now. I took a tube that was like a wrapping paper tube, only it was really thick because it came in some packaging, and just cut that into like little 1-inch pieces, and it works really well. Now I'm using Dixie Belle's Grunge Glaze to go over the crackle on my decoupaged eggs. And I didn't get a ton of crackle with this, and it is very fine crackle. So I'm brushing this on, and then at first I start wiping off the excess, but I wasn't getting a lot of coverage from it, so I decided to go ahead and brush it on and then just pat it off so that I would leave enough of that behind that it would show up in the crackle. Plus, I also wanted these to have a more vintage look to them, so I needed it to stay on there a little bit better than if I had, aggressively wiped it back. I ended up with the look I was going for, with the exception of that I wish there was more crackle. So any place that it looked like it just needed a little bit more of that grunge glaze, I just kept re-adding and then maybe letting it sit for a little bit before wiping it back. I just had to keep playing with it until I got the look I wanted. Since the paint I use, the Fusion paint, has a built-in top coat, that's why I can, very easily wipe off this glaze. So if you're using like a chalk paint, you might want to seal it first before you do any of the glazes, or like watered down paint to make a type of glaze of your own. And with that done, these just need a finishing coat of some clear wax that will give some long-term protection over them, and it also just gives it a nice finished look. So now onto our speckled eggs. I'm going to be using some Fusion's paint in the color Parchment, Dixie Belle in the color Dusty Blue, and my Home Decor chalk paint in the color Sage Shadow. I have a moistened sea sponge that I will dip into the different colors to apply them to the eggs. I'm starting with the Dusty Blue, not trying for full coverage here. I still want a little bit of that brown color to peek through. And then without cleaning my sponge or letting the paint dry, I go straight into the green color and start adding that. And then I just pounce off a little of the excess paint onto a paper towel before going in with the white and blending that into the other two colors. I go back and forth with the different colors until I get the look that I want. Now that those are dry, I'm adding in some of that putty color that I painted the base color with. I'm going to use my fan brush and water down my paints and do my spatters onto the eggs. I decided to bring this ash gray color into the mix for the spatters so that would help tie these in with the other eggs that have the grunge glaze on it that is kind of a gray color. I speed up the drying time with my heat tool, and then I go in with the white Fusion paint called Parchment. Once these were dry, I just roll them over and do the same process on the other sides. To finish these off, I'm using Jolie's finishing wax in clear, and I'm rubbing that on. I just dip my fingers in there and do it that way, massage it around the whole egg, and then wipe back the excess. And then I decided to add some white wax to this, putting it over the clear wax. It's not going to do a lot of coverage, but I just thought it would add to the look of the eggs. So I have my Jolie's finishing wax in the color white. I'm going to do it the same way, just rubbing it on with my fingers and then wiping it back and kind of buffing it out with a cloth. And here I'm just showing you the difference between the one with the white wax and the one without. It's very subtle, barely noticeable, but I do think it looks just a little bit better. Now it's time to prepare my egg cartons for my eggs. I got these from Dollar Tree. They came with little plastic eggs in them, which I'm not using for this project, but these eggs fit really well in this little carton, so that's what I'm going to use them for. I'm taking some Spanish moss, hot gluing that down into the bottom portion, trying to get just enough of the Spanish moss to like in a bird nest shape so that the egg will fit down in there. And on this one, my hot glue gun did go out on me. It needed to be recharged, but I finished it up with Fabri-Tac glue, and that worked just as well. So whatever glue you have, just to keep this sticking down in there, because I thought if people like pick these up and look at them, I don't want the moss falling out. So that's the reason I'm putting them in these egg crates, because they're going to go in the store. But if you just wanted to display these in a bowl or something, you wouldn't even need to do this step. So once I got that all done, I put my little eggs in place. And then I trimmed up the scraggly pieces of Spanish moss that were sticking out over the sides. And this little set will be done. Now on to our faux porcelain eggs. I've got archival ink in the color Night Sky, this scroll stamp that I picked up from Hobby Lobby, IOD's Antiquities stamp, as well as the Alphabellies stamp, and then I didn't show it, but I bring in the vintage texture stamp. So these eggs have been painted with that fusion paint in the color parchment, which has a top coat on it. And so a warning that I think that kind of makes it a little more slippery. So I had to make sure that I did not have too much ink on my stamps. I ended up going in with a paper towel and kind of dabbing off some of it before applying it. But that was just one of a couple of learning curves here with this. I had some issues once I tried to do the top coat over this stamp, and we're gonna work through it and find out what the problem was. So I'm just taking these, different stamps and just going around my egg until I get a design that I like. On this particular one, I did some florals, and now I'm using a little script stamp to go in and just add some little bits and pieces of wording to fill in kind of the blank areas. I noticed that I was getting some smudging as I was touching the fresh stamped ink. So on this one, I went ahead and heat set it before I moved on and did more stamping on there. And the jury is still out as far as I'm concerned on the best way to hold these when applying them. I tried a couple different methods and nothing was foolproof, but you just have to figure out what works best for you. So now to mimic the porcelain, I am using the triple thick gloss glaze. In lieu of using resin, I did not have the type of resin you would need for these, and this goes on really nice and thick and gives a similar effect. And so that's what I wanted to experiment with. But as you can see here, it changed the color of the ink. It made it a much lighter, more aqua color. This is without the glaze on it. And the other one is with the glaze, and the color is completely different. So I had to figure out what was causing it. Was it the paint or was it the ink? So I repainted those two eggs with that same paint. I'm going to, figure this out by deduction. I switched to Stays on Ink in Midnight Blue. and re-stamp the egg with that. I was really glad that I had not stamped all of my eggs. I had only done 2 of them before I applied the glaze, so that way I didn't have to redo all of them. But I'm going to continue stamping on this one and then apply that glaze after it's completely dry. I'm going to heat set it, I'm going to allow it some good drying time, and then we will have the moment of truth by applying that triple thick glaze again and see what happens. Here we go with the triple thick glaze. I go ahead and spread this on, and amazingly enough, there is no color change. This worked perfectly. So it was the ink, not the paint. And I don't know why, they are both permanent inks and they were both completely dry. So that's just my experience with this. So at that point I knew I could go ahead and stamp all my other eggs with the Midnight Blue Stays on ink, and I would have no problems with applying that triple thick glaze. This is where I'm bringing in that texture stamp from IOD called Vintage Textures. This is the crackle stamp. I'm going to add that to the eggs, 3 of the eggs that have just a design on the front, and I'm going to fill in the back side and into that design with the crackle texture stamp. Now on this next one, this is a stamp from the IOD Rural Scenes. It's got a couple of people on a horse, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention that earlier, but I went ahead and did that stamp on here, and then I took these little leafy like stamps to kind of make like a little border around that horse stamp. And I think those were from on the Alphabellies stamp set. I'm sorry I didn't keep everything straight, but this one too is from Rural Scenes. It's a windmill. And so both of these I'm doing just the main stamp on the front, and then I'm adding the crackle texture onto the remaining part of the egg. And this one did get a little smudgy because I didn't dab off enough of the ink and it kind of slid on me. But I guess we just have to embrace that imperfectness when it comes to this sort of thing. This one is the Bow Bunny kind of scroll look stamp from Hobby Lobby. I'm going to add that on a couple of times, like one on the front and one on the back, and then I'm going to fill in between those with a smaller stamp from that same set. Once I had the rest of my eggs all stamped up and dried, I did go in with a coat of the triple thick gloss glaze. And even though this isn't quite as convincing as using resin, I think they turned out pretty good. For my final set of eggs, I'm going to be using a metallic paint called Color Shift. So I did prime these with the gesso, and I did do a coat of the Fusion parchment paint, which was not necessary because what I decided to do was do a base coat underneath these colors with a similar color of chalk paint. So the color shift colors are pastel green, pastel purple, and pastel blue. So for the green, I chose this chalk paint in the color patina. For the blue, I chose Dixie Belle's Blueberry Mineral Chalk Paint. And for the purple, I chose Dixie Belle's Mineral Chalk Paint in the color Lucky Lavender. I'm doing a base coat onto each of my eggs. The Dixie Belle chalk paint only took one coat on the eggs, but the Folk Art chalk paint, which isn't a true chalk paint, it's actually just a matte acrylic paint, that the green one, the patina, it actually took two coats instead. So once again, I'm just going to paint these, halfway down, put them in the little holder to dry, flip them over, and then paint the other half. Once those were dry, I can start applying my metallic paint. This color shift paint is really neat. It has one color, when you move it around, the light source catches it, it changes colors. The green goes to violet, the blue goes to red, and the purple goes to green. So it's just kind of an interesting paint. I think it's really pretty. And having that base coat of a similar color on there just made it work really well. I think I did two coats just for good measure, but it covered really well. Now I'm taking my metallic gold paint, watering it down a little bit, and I'm going to do some little speckles on here. And I'm just going to do the gold because we are going to add some butterflies and tie in that gold around the edges of the butterflies so this all comes together. These are the butterflies I'm going to use. I got them from Temu, and I really like these. They're very fabric-like. It's like a thin type of fabric that you can still kind of see through, and I think they're really pretty. So what I'm going to do is to tie them in with the eggs, just take some of that gold paint that it's called Radiant Gold, same one that I used to do this little splatters on the egg, and just brush this around the edges of those butterflies. I ended up having to switch out and put these butterflies onto a piece of paper towel because they were sticking to this puppy pad that I have down. When I do my spatters on stuff, I put this puppy pad down because I get that paint all over the place. And even with this down, I end up cleaning off my wall and everything surrounding the project area. But see how I just added a little bit of that around the edges, and it just kind of really brings out a little something extra that ties these into those nice and shiny, sparkly eggs. I did a total of 18 so that I could have 3 butterflies on each egg. Now before applying the butterflies, everybody gets a nice thick coat of my triple thick gloss glaze. I'm using Fabri-Tac glue to apply my butterflies. I just folded the butterflies in half, just giving them a slight crease so that I could apply that glue right on that crease, press it down onto the egg, and then the wings will be able to kind of sit up away from the egg instead of just laying flat down onto it. And I just kind of switched up the arrangement here and there. I basically did the same type of pattern you know, one up at the top, one in the middle, one at the bottom, but I just kind of changed the direction just to make them a little more interesting and not all just in line doing the same thing. I think these added a really whimsical touch to it. I'm not the shiny, glittery type person, but I love the way these turned out. I think they are so fun, and it's just, it's yeah, like I said, it's just whimsical. Like, I love that. And here they are all waiting to dry and waiting for me to finish their little egg carton with the Spanish moss. They can be put in place, and this project is complete. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you, my returning viewers. Your love and support means the world to me. If you are new here, I hope that you find my content useful and will consider subscribing to my channel. But more importantly, I hope I've inspired all of you to go create something. See you next time.